You can also help by contributing in fundraising efforts or by becoming part of the year-round sponsorship of Ronald McDonald House Charities. For more information about RMHC, visit rmhc.org. And remember to give your support to KCAA's Relationships 2.0 host, Michelle Skeen, as she runs the 38th Annual Chicago Marathon in support of Ronald McDonald House Charities.
Hello, everyone. This is Nina MD, Fusion of Science and Beauty. Listen to my show every Wednesday night, 6 p.m., KCAA 1050, where I'm going to give you the latest, greatest on anti-aging.
Walters Mercedes-Benz is excited to announce the 20th Annual Walters Children's Charity Golf Classic, Monday, October 1st at Victoria Country Club in Riverside. In the last 19 years, Walters has raised over $3.5 million for the benefit of Loma Linda University Children's Hospital. Hurry, sponsorships and player slots are still available. For more information and to register, go to waltersccc.org or call Kathy Keenley at 951-688-3332.
This is KCAA Loma Linda, the station that leaves no listener behind. CNBC News is next, a courtesy of buysellmakeoffer.com, where you can post a video about items you have for sale. Sign up now. It's free.
Some big hits on worries about when the Fed will start hiking interest rates and on lower oil prices, pushing energy shares down. The Dow today down 179 points, ending off the lows of the day. The Nasdaq off 72, and oil back below $46 a barrel. Meantime, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton breaking her long-standing silence and coming out today against building the Keystone XL pipeline, calling it a distraction from the need to combat climate change. And Volkswagen issuing a profit warning, admitting that 11 million of its diesel engine cars were fitted with software designed to dupe tough EPA emission tests. That's far more than the 500,000 the EPA found out with the illegal program. The automaker lost $35 billion in value in just the past 2 trading days in Europe because of the scandal, as investors there dumped out of shares in VW. I'm Tom Busby, CNBC.
If you're without dental insurance, do you have a plan to care for your teeth without spending a fortune? We do. Introducing Dental Plans. Dental Plans takes a bite out of your dental bills with savings from 10 to 60%.
There's no reason to not cut your dental bills in half.
Join Dental Plans today and save 15% off any plan with promo code DENTAL981. Plus, get 1 month free. Visit dentalplans.com or call 800-391-DENTAL. Savings plans are not insurance. Consult with plan detail page for additional plan terms. Not all plans and offers available in all markets.
If you feel like online dating just won't work for you, try EH Plus. EH Plus is a new personal matchmaking service by eHarmony, and it far exceeds what regular online dating sites can do. One-on-one attention from a PhD matchmaker, amazing singles, and guaranteed introductions we know are perfect for you. Visit us today at ehplus.com/love or call 1-855-940-LOVE.
Consider this your invitation to sell. At buysellmakeoffer.com, you can sell as much as you want for the next 60 days without paying any fees whatsoever. Sound incredible? It is, and it's true. Buysellmakeoffer.com is the new exciting way to sell your stuff online. Make extra money right now. Sell your old car, furniture, video games, household items, clothes, even your home. Sell anything that's legal. Load up your stuff to sell right now at buysellmakeoffer.com. This is your official invitation to get on board to sell your stuff right now. Free for the next 60 days. And once you see how easy it is, you'll want to sign up for more because there are no item fees. That's right. Take this opportunity to move items from the other guys and sell it for free. You might even win a Samsung tablet, Amazon gift cards, and other cool prizes. BuySellMakeOffer.com is the future of online selling. You can use Skype to talk to your buyer or seller. Plus, you can use video to showcase your items. BuySellMakeOffer.com.
Good afternoon. It's 3:03. I'm Di Rice with the very latest in live local news here on KCAA 1050 AM. A Norco man was killed early Saturday morning when he crashed into a utility pole while trying to pass another car in Fontana. The 44-year-old driver, whose name has not been released, was heading west on Harupa Avenue at about 2:52 when he attempted to pass and struck a center median near the intersection of Banana Avenue. Police say a 2015 Chrysler 200 swerved to the right and collided with a utility pole before coming to rest against a tree. The driver and sole occupant of the vehicle was pronounced dead at the scene. And several hours after Riverside County Sheriff deputies resumed their search for 20-year-old Dustin Leader, who fell off a boat on Lake Elsinore Sunday, a body was found. Sheriff officials found the body at about 11 o'clock this morning, though they have not confirmed that the body is Leader's. Leader, 20, of Homeland, was helping his father pull a disabled boat to shore around 7:40 p.m. when at some point he fell into the lead boat that was operating as the tow craft. Two of Leader's friends called authorities after they had realized he had likely fallen. Inland Empire weather, some variable high clouds out there. Still a slight chance of showers. Mostly sunny skies, though, for you tomorrow, with tomorrow's high about 91. Overnight lows 68 to 71. And looking at your drive, not too bad. In Corona on the 91 eastbound, it's a little slow between Green River and Highway 71. And in Colton, the 215 southbound between La Cadena and Columbia is a little bit slow as well. That is the very latest with news, weather, and traffic on the station that leaves no listener behind, KCAA 1050 AM. This report has been brought to you by the American Association for Cancer Research. The American Association for Cancer Research, finding cures together. Please support cancer research by donating today at www.aacrfoundation.org.
Did you know here at KCAA 1050 AM that we developed an app for all your Android devices? We're talking about your smartphone, your tablets, you name it. You have an Android format, you can take KCAA with you everywhere you go. We're talking about our audio stream, our video stream, and even our podcast. Go to kcaaexpress.com. That's kcaaexpress.com. kcaaexpress.com.
Do you like cars, racing, adventure and speed, motorsports of any kind? If it has speed, high performance, or burns octane, there's a brand new show for you. Do you have 1030 weight in your blood, or are you running on 104 performance octane? Then gear up for a brand new show on KCAA called Kcaa Racing. Tune in Saturdays at 4 p.m. with host Joe Britt for news, interviews, and all kinds of stuff you can use about racing and the automotive world. Whether it's learning how to put spark plugs in or spark up your supercharger, Joe's got the answer for you.
Ready, buddy? Ready. All right, Dan. Get it up.
Kcaa Racing. Find out how Joe built the Stallion GT1 exotic sports car, or hear the area's best experts on automotive questions. It's Kcaa Racing, right here, where we put you in the driver's seat and it doesn't stop till you cross the finish line. Saturdays at 4 p.m. right here on KCAA. It's Kcaa Racing.
Well, see you later. Come on, guys, let's go.
Welcome to Relationships 2.0. I'm Michelle Skeen. My special guest today is David Helvarg. He is the author of Saved by the Sea, Hope, Heartbreak, and Wonder in the Blue World. Welcome, David. I think we still have some music in the background.
Yeah. Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining me. I really enjoyed the way that you wove your personal story into and really relevant, interesting information about the ocean and our relationship to the ocean into your book, Saved by the Sea.
Yeah, it's, well, it just seemed I'd written, it's my fifth book on the ocean, and it kept coming back to people asking why. And I think we all have personal stories to tell of how we link to the natural world and how it impacts our lives. Certainly, for some people, it's the other 29% of the planet that's, and it's easier to relate, I guess, to mountains and meadows, since there's lots of air around you.
Yeah.
But some of us are just drawn to the salty side of our blue world.
And I think that a lot less is known. And as you talk about in your book, a lot of people bring awareness to the dirt surface of our earth and not to the water surface. And I'm really hoping today that you can really open people's eyes and hearts to concerns that we should have about the ocean.
Sure. I mean, just to start, we've got this misnomer calling it, the Earth. 71% of the surface of the planet, of course, is ocean, but that really underestimates its reality, which is over 97% of the living habitat. I mean, all of us air-breathing mammals, we kind of live within, really, all of us terrestrials who live within about 3 feet, 300-foot range from mole burrows 3 feet down to the nesting birds in the top of the trees about 300 feet up, and yet most of the living habitat, as I say, it's from the surface of the ocean, where I've seen green sea turtles munching and shark fins, and turtles munching on seagrasses and too often plastic bags, down to 7 miles below the Marianas Trench, where only 3 humans have been to date, and there's life abundant throughout this water column. Of course, it's a very, for most of us, alien world, because, as I say, it's this unbreathable liquid medium that's got upwellings and temperature variations, currents, and biological forces that sting and bite, and but also enamor. I mean, for me, at some other level, we all come from salt water on both an evolutionary and biological individual level. I know in the book I talk about some years I spent in San Diego on a cliff house 60 feet above the ocean, and in the winter the house would shake, and I never slept better in my life. It's like, the beat of the waves, like your mother's heartbeat.
And like the sound, and the sound machines that help people sleep are always those ocean sounds, right?
Right. It's as I say, it's very close to our heartbeat. Our bodies are 70% salt water, and our salinity of our blood is, interestingly, as salt as the ocean was when we first emerged from it. So there's, and as I say, both evolutionary and individual embryonic level. There's a whole book called The Inner Fish, just about how our developmental stages move through salt water, and through that recreate in each of us that evolutionary moment. But it's challenging because it is a very alien world for most of us, and it's also very hard to see what we've done to it, because one of the things, early experiences for lots of us is, go to the beach, and no matter how much your parents are keeping an eye on you, or you're 3 or 4 and you get knocked down by a wave for the first time, and you kind of come up sputtering and look back out at that ocean, and that may be the first time you realize you're something part of something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And those experiences, for some of us, they we're like little ducklings. We get embedded by the ocean. I know I grew up on Long Island Sound, and we used to be members of the dock, which was just a pier that we could go in and play with, the local wildlife, which was, for us, horseshoe crabs that have been around about 600 million years longer than our species. And I remember my boys' culture dividing between those of us who used to just pick them up and skim them back in the water, and the older, what we called the hoods, who were older than us and used to corral them and break their shells. And one day, sort of by dint of number, we chased them away, and I remember an old white-haired eel fisherman coming over and telling us that we did right. You have to protect the critters that can't protect themselves. And I think people grow up and realize their connections with wildlife and this last frontier that's all salt water pool of a planet we live on, and and hopefully, we, as I say, you go to the beach and you look out, and it doesn't look different, but over time, it's really been altered. We've had this tremendous impact, and we're discovering new wonders and new species of life, even as we put them at risk.
And what, you talk about, there was just so much I didn't know. And it's, books like yours that can really bring awareness to all of us about what we're doing that is contributing to negative impact on our ocean. What about the fishing? You talk about that in the book and what's going on with, because I kind of feel like there's a lot of focus on, I don't like what eating meat does to the environment. And yet I don't feel like there's as much focus on how eating seafood is bad for the environment.
Oh, heck no. I mean, I've had people who've straight-faced told me that they're vegetarian, they just eat seafood.
Right. And without without a conscience, like it's a guilt-free kind of food, like you can eat all you want.
Well, there's a lot of, because, it's the last wild market, it's last hunter-gathering, and again, out of sight, out of mind. The cascading disasters we face today are industrial overfishing for the global seafood market, oil, chemical, plastic and nutrient pollution, loss of coastal habitat to development, and on top of all that, fossil fuel-fired climate change. And so, they're interconnected disasters, but certainly one that's well established is the idea of industrial overfishing. I mean, in the blink of an eye, and geologically, in which I've lived my life, 90% of the large pelagic open ocean fish have disappeared. That is the biggest sharks and tuna and grouper. They didn't really disappear. We know where they went, onto our plates and, the white linen restaurants and supermarkets of the developed world. And yet, today with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization saying 75% of all the edible marine wildlife is either overfished or in a state of collapse, fished to the maximum, overfished, collapsing.
Right.
We really need to take a different approach. There are 1 billion people who are pretty dependent on local fishing. They call them artisanal fishing people, from right here on the coast of California to Senegal to Southeast Asia, who are kind of community-based fishing groups. And they've, over the last, since World War II, really lost out to this kind of industrial fishing, giant ocean-going trawlers that literally will take up, to 100 tons of fish in a trawl. The biggest of these industrial trawlers. There were high seas drift nets that went for 40 miles per boat. So in the 1990s, there were 40,000 miles of net floating in the North Pacific. Now, luckily, part of that
Say that again.
40,000 miles of netting dropping 12 feet into the water, and they took everything out of the water. They were supposedly 1,000-boat fleet fishing for squid. For better or worse, about 10% of them were, 10% of them were pirate fishermen that said they were fishing for squid, but because they took salmon out of the North Pacific, there was a treaty between the U.S., Russia, Japan, and Canada that you don't take high-sea salmon, you let them return to their native treaties. And so there was basically, I've written about it, what they called a salmon laundry, hot fish, and these pirates eventually led the UN to ban all high seas drift netting. And so, it's a good model. I mean, if you ban the destructive fisheries, if you get rid of the industrial fishing, then there's a chance to turn things around. And people talk about sustainable fishing. It really means, educating ourselves and
yeah. So what does that mean? Like if I'm at a restaurant and I see line caught tuna, is that good?
It's if it's line caught Pacific tuna, it's better. There's a list. There's these kind of pocket lists that you can download from Monterey Bay Aquarium and others that talk about sort of a safety range, green, yellow, red, what are sustainable fish, what are at risk. An easier principle that I go by is eat lower on the food chain, because the top predators are most at risk, and it's the big fish, the tunas and the Goliath groupers and the sharks, certainly. They've been most hammered down. And also, the top predators, they're slower breeding, and also they bioaccumulate all our pollutants. So, all that plastic and other pollution that breaks down into microbeads is then taken up through the food chain, and you end up, if you eat shellfish, if you eat small fish, sardines that are coming back in California and the like, that tends to be healthier and also more sustainable. And and some things are counterintuitive, like people assume that it's better to eat farmed fish than wild, but
yeah, what does that mean?
It really it means there are no easy answers. That if you're farming shellfish, they take a lot of the nutrients out of the water, out of the pollutants, because with our farm chemicals, we're putting too many nutrients into the water. But on the other hand, if you're farming predator fish like salmon, that tends to be like any other concentrated animal feed thing. That's like a cattle feed. They feed the salmon, don't swim wild. They basically feed them a lot of fish meal made from wild fish, and because they're concentrated, they don't develop the energy. Their flesh isn't the red flesh of wild salmon that eat shrimp and krill. So they actually, I've been on fish farms where they have what they call a samofan, and you actually take a look and you can choose what color flesh you want, and then they throw additives into the pens to grow them out. But,
wow.
And because they're also concentrated, they concentrate sea lice, and so the wild fish swimming by, the wild smolt, the baby salmon that are trying to get out of the wild rivers, can be jumped on by these farm lice and killed. And so growing top predators doesn't make sense in terms of farming. Growing in natural settings, in Vietnam, they grow shrimp in the mangroves, and they grow them in a natural way where it's not as intensive aquaculture. But with a fish like salmon, I mean, it's great. Here in California, it was commercial fishermen like the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations that for 30 years worked with the farmers and the environmental groups to protect the rivers and the watersheds that protect the salmon. And so we, still have wild salmon in Alaska. There's great populations of wild salmon, enough to, done right, feed both the humans and the bears, and the salmon that die upriver. Their nutrients go into the trees, and so it's like every Sitka pine has a little bit of salmon spirit in it, and understanding our connections to the natural world is key. Eating lower, like I say, on the food chain. I wrote one of my books, 50 Ways to Save the Ocean, is just about how people would ask me, and do ask me all the time, well, what can I do about things like industrial overfishing, the collapse of marine wildlife, or the impacts of climate change on the ocean? And of course,
I want you to save your answer. We're going to do a little cliffhanger here. We have to take a short break. This is just fascinating. Stay tuned for my continued conversation with David Helvarg, discussing his latest book, Saved by the Sea. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Do you panic when you don't receive an immediate response to a text, email, or voicemail? Do you become clingy or demanding when you feel someone pulling away? Do you stay in unhealthy relationships because it's better than being alone? Or do you avoid relationships altogether? If you answer yes to any of these questions, you may struggle with fear of abandonment. This fear can trigger intense feelings of jealousy and anxiety that result in unhelpful behaviors that ultimately sabotage your relationships. Psychologist Michelle Skeen's powerful book, Love Me, Don't Leave Me, will help you develop a new perspective about yourself and others, and you will learn to recognize and change the behaviors that are hurting your relationships. You deserve to have closer, loving, and lasting connections. To find out how, go to www.michelleskeen.com. www.michelleskeen.com. That's www.michelleskeen.com.
KCAA invites you to support our very own Relationships 2.0 host, Michelle Skeen, in raising funds for the Ronald McDonald House Charities in the 38th Annual Chicago Marathon, October 11th. Every year, RMHC and its local chapters give more than 7 million children the strength to persevere as they run their own marathons, fighting illness and injury throughout months, sometimes years. Michelle will be running in the marathon, and if you would like to join her in becoming a Team RMHC runner, please go to the RMHC homepage or simply Google RMHC, Ronald McDonald House Charities. You can also help by contributing in fundraising efforts or by becoming part of the year-round sponsorship of Ronald McDonald House Charities. For more information about RMHC, visit rmhc.org. And remember to give your support to KCAA's Relationships 2.0 host, Michelle Skeen, as she runs the 38th Annual Chicago Marathon in support of Ronald McDonald House Charities.
Do you tend to overreact and let your emotions rule your interactions with others? Do you become defensive or find it difficult to see things from another's point of view? You're not alone. Despite the fact that we all have to deal with people in our daily lives, many of us have difficulties with interpersonal relationships. My suggestion? Pick up a copy of the Interpersonal Problems Workbook. This workbook combines powerful evidence-based techniques for strengthening relationships in all areas of your life, whether it's at home or work, with a significant other, a parent, or your child. To find out more about the Interpersonal Problems Workbook, go to www.michelleskeen.com. That's www.michelleskeen.com. Pick up a copy and improve your relationships.
Welcome back to Relationships 2.0. I'm chatting with David Helvarg. He is the author of Saved by the Sea. David, tell everyone how they can find you and learn more about you and your other books.
Sure. Through my organization, Blue Frontier, which we have a listing of my books and the work we're doing to try and turn the tide for oceans. It's bluefront.org, BLUEFRONT.org, and we're actually in the next about 2 or 3 weeks from now, we're going to have a new website up after. So that's, exciting if you're sitting in my chair, but I think
it is
we're, I've written 6 books, 5 of them on the ocean, and what Blue Frontier tries to do is act as an honest broker among all the people, that are involved in marine conservation and trying to expand that to all the people who benefit, which is really everybody. And you just take a deep breath and you think about it, and you realize every other breath you take is generated by, phytoplankton in the ocean. The ocean's the driver of climate and weather, and what we were saying before the break, I mean, people would ask me, sort of sometimes feeling overwhelmed by the sense that, it's too big to deal with, overfishing on a global scale or climate impacts that's acidifying the ocean. And my answer is always that, everything we do every day has an effect on the seas around us. That, the choices we make in our daily life, our energy and food choices, our choices to be politically engaged or not, that impacts the ocean. We're too much involved in it, whether, even if we never live by it. In fact, one of my group's affiliates, one of our board members created the Colorado Ocean Coalition.
I like it.
And, I'd say it's the biggest ocean happening in Colorado in 30 million years. They've engaged. There's a Teens for Oceans group out of Denver, and so there's a bunch of very progressive dive shops out of Boulder, and Vicki Nichols has started a Blue the Dive movement out of there because people understand the links. The trick is to expand that understanding. When I talk about and report on some of the ongoing industrial disasters taking place at sea, on, above, and below. I'm more frustrated than despairing because we know what the solutions are. The challenge really is growing the solutions faster than the problems, and that, what we lack is not answers. What we lack is the political will to enact them. I mean,
so why isn't there? Well, I guess there are documentaries that come out that bring a lot of attention to maybe a particular aspect of the ocean. I still haven't been able to get up the nerve to watch it, but what was the one about there are a couple of them. There's one about SeaWorld, right? And
right, Blackwater or Blackfish rather.
Blackfish, and then the other one about the awful dolphin stuff.
The Cove, and that was done by my friend Louis Soyas.
Okay.
And actually, both he and the director of Blackfish have both been given our Peter Benchley Ocean Awards. We've started, and now it's going into its 9th year, kind of the Academy Awards of the Oceans for people who work on conservation from the global to the local level. I mean, we've given it to 4 heads of state. This year we gave it to Prince Albert of Monaco, but also to local coastal activists in the Carolinas. But I'd actually go see the Cove. I mean, I understand why you're reluctant, but he did a very good job, I think, in the hands of some people.
No, I just mean it makes me, that's not a reason to avoid it, but sometimes that's the kind of stuff makes me really sad.
Well, he focused on the activists and who are trying to make change, and I think it's inspirational. I suspect if somebody like PETA had filmed it, it could have been turned into, a slaughter fest. But even though the animals are getting killed, people are fighting back, and fewer are getting killed today. And his new film is called Racing Extinction, and it's sort of along similar lines.
Okay.
Where right now, one of the ways to beat extinction for our fellow creatures, if not ourselves, is to get off fossil fuels. And so one of the things that my group Blue Frontier is just helping to organize is what we call a Sea Party, which in 2016 will make sure that none of the candidates fail to address really dumb proposals to start drilling for oil in the Arctic Ocean and off the Atlantic coast. One is an impossibly challenging marine environment that's melting away because of the loss of sea ice from fossil fuels, from burning oil, and the head of the Coast Guard told me they don't have capacity to respond if there is an oil spill or disaster up there. Admiral Paul Zunfeld, who's a commandant, and he spoke at a last Blue Vision. And then just last month in August, I was on the East Coast and on Long Island and the Jersey Shore and Ocean City, Maryland, and millions of people. This is the highlight of their years, is to spend a week on the East Coast beaches on the Outer Banks, and to put that at risk. It's a multi-billion-dollar economy, but it's also a spiritual connection for millions of people. It's where they grew up, where they remember their, and to put all that at risk for oil and gas at a point where the science already tells us that we can't even drill the known reserves that we have, or if we do, we create a situation where you have a runaway climate disaster.
Yeah.
And so I've been out there on offshore rigs off California and in the Gulf, and I feel like when I'm visiting them, I feel like I'm visiting a whaling ship in the 1850s. That's a great part of our maritime history. We should respect it, but we should move on.
Well, it wasn't that long ago that there was the spill in Santa Barbara, right?
Yeah, hell, that was a couple of months ago, and it was Exxon Oil coming ashore, and unfortunately it was the one pipeline company that had gotten a judge to rule against the county's right to regulate them, and so it was the one pipeline in the county that didn't have a safety valve for a leakage, and therefore you had a 100,000-gallon leak, and 20,000 went right back into the ocean, where, of course, we had the much more massive spill in 1969 that kind of set off the modern environmental movement. I mean, when I was a young man, I remember, we had sort of this double blow. It was the scene of
Exxon Valdez, is that
oil-covered
what?
birds in Santa Barbara at the same time that a river caught fire in Cleveland, Ohio, the Cuyahoga, because of the high levels of pollution. And that created a modern environmental movement that began to make significant change. Now it's, 45, 50 years later, it's time to revive some of those old logos like, the Santa Barbara folks said, get oil out. Coal and oil were great energy systems for the 16th and 19th century, but in the 21st, we really need to look at the impacts, and climate impacts on the ocean are not only rising sea levels and increased storminess with things I've witnessed like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, but it's also acidifying the ocean. All that additional carbon is being buffered by the surface layers of the ocean and being turned into carbonic acid, which shifts the pH of the ocean, which essentially makes it harder for every shell-forming critter, from corals to clams, to capture calcium carbonate out of the seawater and build their homes. And so we're literally seeing a kind of souring of the ocean that we haven't seen in millions of years as a direct result of burning our fossil fuels. So again, it's choices we make.
Right. And that we have the power. And I know it's so easy for all of us to feel like as individuals that we can't make a difference, and it's also overwhelming, but we really can. And when faced with these numbers that you cite in your book, what was the live coral? How much has that diminished in the last several decades? You mentioned that in the book. It was.
Well, basically, we've lost about half the tropical corals on the planet just since mid-century, and between direct impacts, runoff, various overfishing, they all impact the reefs, and now we're seeing bleaching and acidification that have much more deleterious effects. And I mean, the example I use, which is a personal example, because when I was 15 years old, my mom took my sister for 18th birthday and me down to the Florida Keys, and it was the first time I'd seen this kind of clear, beautiful tropical waters. And until then, as a kid, I always felt like I was born a generation too soon to visit alien worlds. And then 15 years old, and I get a mask and snorkel and go off the seawall and see all these living rocks, multicolored corals and shoaling fish, and my first turtle and hammerhead shark. And it was just realizing this whole alien world right off our shores. And when I was 15, there was 90% live coral cover in the Florida Keys. Today, it's less than 10%, and that's the result of
so crazy.
It's all the impacts of human development, of agricultural runoff, of leaching from all the septic systems there, of the warming of the Caribbean as a result of climate change. And you talk to somebody like Billy Causey, who runs the National Marine Sanctuaries down in the southeast, and he started out as a tropical fish collector in the 70s, and talking to him, it's like a Jeremiah from the Old Testament, talking about how he saw the decline of the reef over time. Now, we're going to lose more reefs. I mean, just as a result of the fossil fuels we've already burned, we're going to lose a majority of the coral reefs on the planet.
Wow, does that include the Great Barrier Reef? What's happened with that?
Yeah, I visited the Great Barrier Reef, and one of the scientists there said, when we look at your reefs, you've got less diversity, and you're going to be hammered first, but we're going to be hammered also. And it's happening. I mean, the best news, I guess, is that where you protect reefs, where you restore habitat and marine wildlife, they're more resistant to the impacts of climate. It's like anything. It's like if you're immune compromised, you can, be taken down by a flu. But if you're healthy, you've got more resistance. That's what some of the top scientists I know, friend Jeremy Jackson and his wife Nancy Knowlton, they're also winners of our Benchley Awards and top coral scientist. He's kind of excited because in the Caribbean they've stopped hunting parrotfish and grouper and these are grazers, and because they go back on the reef and they graze off the algae, the reefs are getting healthy again. When you take out.
So how did they do something so kind of compassionate for, the sea world?
They were scientists who got tired of documenting the collapse of an ecosystem, and they became outspoken. And when they speak with authority, small island nations in the Caribbean have responded. Places as Cuba is opening up now. That's one of the biological hotspots in the Caribbean, and there's lots of people now talking with Cuban marine biologists about how to protect their turtle beaches and some of the healthiest coral systems in the hemisphere from the potential threat of overdevelopment with, as American tourism comes back to the island.
Right. Oh,
these are the global questions that we really have to answer in the here and now. We don't have, a lot of time left because these systems are in a state of collapse, and yet at the same time there are models. I mean, my last book, The Golden Shore, California's Love Affair with the Sea, California is a model of when you do right by the coast and ocean, there's still enough resiliency that you can see a dramatic comeback of wildlife and habitats.
California has done a good job?
California does a good job because Californians have a sense of entitlement to the coast and ocean because we have a coastal act that gives us access and people feel ownership, and it's what I call a kind of blue democracy. We have a diversity of ocean interest with fishermen and surfers and beachgoers and the ports and the Navy, and because no single industry dominates, we tend to have very impassioned discussions that come out with good endpoints. So, for example, we had this 15-year-long fight over creating what they call marine protected areas, no-take zones. And the end point is we now have a network. 16% of our state waters are now protected from extraction, from fishing or drilling or dumping. And it's kind of like we've taken our world-class state park system and put it in the water column. And already I have a friend, Dirk, who spent years documenting the return of the marine wildlife in places like the Channel Islands. So with 39 million people in the world's sixth largest economy, we're sort of a model that, yes, we can do things right when people, one, care, and two, participate in making change.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that we live in a state that's doing a good job. We're going to take a short break, thanks in part to wonderful people like you who are bringing awareness to all of this. We'll take a short break. Stay tuned. Come back for more conversation with David Helberg about his book, Saved by the Sea. And go to bluefrontiers.org to find out more.
Bluefront.org.
Oh, Bluefront. I'm sorry. Bluefront.org. I'm so sorry, David. Bluefront.org.
KCAA invites you to support our very own Relationships 2.0 host, Michelle Skeen, in raising funds for the Ronald McDonald House Charities in the 38th Annual Chicago Marathon, October 11th. Every year, RMHC and its local chapters give more than 7 million children the strength to persevere as they run their own marathons, fighting illness and injury throughout months and sometimes years. Michelle will be running in the marathon, and if you would like to join her in becoming a Team RMHC runner, please go to the RMHC homepage or simply Google RMHC, Ronald McDonald House Charities. You can also help by contributing in fundraising efforts or by becoming part of the year-round sponsorship of Ronald McDonald House Charities. For more information about RMHC, visit rmhc.org. And remember to give your support to KCAA's Relationships 2.0 host, Michelle Skeen, as she runs the 38th Annual Chicago Marathon in support of Ronald McDonald House Charities.
Do you tend to overreact and let your emotions rule your interactions with others? Do you become defensive or find it difficult to see things from another's point of view? You're not alone. Despite the fact that we all have to deal with people in our daily lives, many of us have difficulties with interpersonal relationships. My suggestion? Pick up a copy of the Interpersonal Problems Workbook. This workbook combines powerful evidence-based techniques for strengthening relationships in all areas of your life, whether it's at home or work, with a significant other, a parent, or your child. To find out more about the Interpersonal Problems Workbook, go to www.michelleskeen.com. That's www.michelleskeen.com. Pick up a copy and improve your relationships.
There are kids in this country who didn't have a parent at their baseball games or recitals because their parents were serving in faraway places. But now they're coming home, and Wounded Warrior Project assists them through the Warriors to Work program.
My mom used to be a tank programmer. Now she works with computers. I'm really glad she's home because I can't eat my dad's marshmallow macaroni anymore.
To support the Warriors to Work program, contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Do you panic when you don't receive an immediate response to a text, email, or voicemail? Do you become clingy or demanding when you feel someone pulling away? Do you stay in unhealthy relationships because it's better than being alone? Or do you avoid relationships altogether? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you may struggle with fear of abandonment. This fear can trigger intense feelings of jealousy and anxiety that result in unhelpful behaviors that ultimately sabotage your relationships. Psychologist Michelle Skeen's powerful book, Love Me, Don't Leave Me, will help you develop a new perspective about yourself and others, and you will learn to recognize and change the behaviors that are hurting your relationships. You deserve to have closer, loving, and lasting connections. To find out how, go to www.michelleskeen.com. That's www.michelleskeen.com.
Welcome back to Relationships 2.0. I'm chatting with David Helvarg, author of Saved by the Sea, Hope, and Wonder in the Blue World. His website is bluefront.org. Go check it out. Find out how you can make a difference in our oceans. David, does the United States do a better job than other countries, or how do we rank in terms of our treatment of our water?
On some things, our fisheries are improving. We've put better management into commercial fishing, and again, John Kerry was one of our Benchley Award winners this year. The Secretary of State has been very active in promoting globally both these marine protected areas, these kind of wilderness zones in the ocean that can act as biological reserves for the future, and also active against pirate fishing. I mean, there's a significant part of the fishing industry that uses slave labor to illegally take shark and other fish that are endangered and to fish in other people's waters. And this past spring, in fact, we organized as part of our Blue Vision Summit, a Healthy Ocean Hill Day, which was the largest citizen lobby for ocean conservation in history, and along with putting down our markers against offshore drilling, we also lobbied for a bill that's likely to pass soon. It's a bipartisan bill against pirate fishing, where you would have check for illegal landings. You could stop them in any ports they attempted to land illegal fish, and also do effective surveillance and law enforcement. And so getting, it's very interesting to actually be supporting a bill that had unanimous support in the Senate by House.
That's terrific. It should. I mean, it should, right? This should not be partisan at all.
Totally. The ocean should not be a partisan issue. So I don't know if I should be happy about that, or I should just be a little depressed that I'm getting excited by the fact that Republicans and Democrats can both agree at least to oppose pirates.
Yeah, well, I think we should be excited. Any progress is good, but
and so I think the U.S. is, in many areas doing well. What we're not doing is we're not reinvesting. I mean, when we passed the Clean Water Act, we cleaned up a lot of our coastal areas by investing in advanced sewage treatment and storm drainage, and a lot of that money that went in the 1970s is no longer being committed to keeping basic infrastructure like our water treatment facilities and sewage facilities up to date. And the result is we've seen, waters, municipal drinking water poisoned in 2 significant cities in this country in the past year, in Virginia, where a chemical spill spoiled the river, and in Toledo, Ohio, where an algae bloom took place. And the algae blooms are both, in the Great Lakes and in our coastal areas where too much runoff of high nutrient nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, essentially industrial agriculture, is being allowed to run off. So
wow.
On some issues, the U.S. is advanced. On other issues, like how much farm chemicals are getting into our coastal waters, we're not doing enough. And again, what you can do, you can both do more organic and vegetarian consumption, because it actually impacts how much synthetic chemicals are being demanded and how much consumer demand there is for, better farming methods. And you can also be an active citizen, what we call a seaweed rebel, and go upstream.
Like that.
And there's groups, the woman, the scientist who discovered the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a seasonal zone, sometimes the size of Connecticut, where with the spring, if we, and it's waste too, it's waste for the farmer. If you use too many chemicals on and synthetic oil-based fertilizers, like in the Midwest, in states like Iowa and Illinois, you put 140 pounds of synthetic fertilizer for every acre of corn you grow. It's too much. The surplus follows gravity into eventually the Mississippi River, and in the spring floods, you grow the second crop of algae in the Gulf of Mexico. As it decays, it sucks all the dissolved oxygen out of the water, and everything that can't flee dies. And these
wow, that's awful.
And awful and expanding. The UN says there are now 450 major dead zones in our coastal seas as a result of this kind of destructive runoff. And so, getting back to using less chemicals and not concentrating our meat animals when we grow them. These are the ways to reduce those kind of impacts. And so,
so like pasture raised beef, right?
Yeah, grass-fed, not concentrating them.
Grass-fed, right.
And these concentrated animal feed operations in the Eastern Shore and Chesapeake Bay, it's these massive, billion chickens that these big companies raise, but they leave it to the farmers to deal with the waste, so it runs off into the bay and creates
so is that why it sounds like, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that why it sounds like the Atlantic coast is kind of worse off than the Pacific coast?
It's kind of the smaller, the Aral Sea disappeared, the Black Sea is highly polluted, the Mediterranean's, trying to keep even, the Atlantic. The Pacific covers 1/3 of the planet. The Pacific is doing better just because it's 1/3 of the planet. It's harder to, see the cumulative impacts, but everything can be impacted unless we do it the right way. The good news is there's still resiliency there when we, as I said, a great example is here in California when we first came in. The first gold rush was actually sea beaver, was a killing off of the sea otters, and then the whales, and then we started hunting elephant seals for their oil. By 1896, there were like 20 to 100 elephant seals left on this one island, Guadalupe Island off Baja. The Smithsonian sent an expedition. They saw 10 of them, and they shot 7 of them for specimens to take back to the museum.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, we eventually, by the 1960s and 70s, we changed our attitudes. We appreciated the value of the Pacific and its wildlife. we passed acts like the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Clean Water Act. And we saw the comeback of these animals. In 1990, the first elephant seal hauled up on this beach by Hearst Castle. In 1992, the first breeding pair. This year, 27,000 elephant seals returned to that one beach to molt and breed.
Oh, so terrific. So it just is about people not losing hope and instead getting involved and staying involved like you have. I mean, your love of the ocean has been going on for decades, and it must be, well, I'm sure you have kind of good days and bad days with the news that you get.
Yeah, if I just read briefly from the end of the book, it kind of like puts it in perspective for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
I just said I was not born for peaceful times or calm waters, nor have I seen many. We're living in the age of global markets and mass extinctions, the birth of celebrity websites, YouTube and Twitter, and the death of sharks, sea turtles, and others of our planetary brethren who were already ancient when the first small mammals left their dirt-filled burrows. Well, I've gone from a radical activist to war reporter, private investigator, TV producer, author, and activist again. I do so with a more sober assessment than when I was young, running wild in the streets, chanting "Power to the People," slogan recently appropriated for a Oral-B toothbrush ad. I don't really expect a revolution in either politics or consciousness to radically alter the cascading ecological collapse of our ocean planet. I do, however, note a rising line of, say, ecological mindfulness approaching the declining plane of biological diversity on our water world, and where that X crosses will tell us how much is left to save and restore if we can. Not certain it'll be enough to turn the tide. All I know for certain is if we don't try, we lose. And this salty blue world of ours is too heart-achingly beautiful, scary, and sacred to lose. If you don't believe me, join the space program, travel out into the cosmos, and look back from the heavens. It's not God's green earth, it's God's blue marble.
That's beautiful. You know, that reminds me that you mention in your book that when they're going to space and sending footage back, the thing they're always looking for is water on another planet, right? And yet ours gets ignored.
I know. We've got this whole water planet. We've literally mapped less than 10% of the ocean with the resolution we've mapped all of the moon and Mars. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, along with investing in conservation, we still have to invest in exploration. I mean, there's like less than 1% of the ocean that's actually been seen by human eyes. They're very
Is it just that classic example of we don't pay attention to what's in our own backyard? Like we think we have to go further away to find the answer or to focus on something or discover something, and we need to bring this kind of, awareness and mindfulness to what's right in front of us.
Absolutely. It's like, like when you're a teenager and you finally can't wait to get away from home and from mom and dad, and later on you appreciate mom, and it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's like this Mother Ocean. We got to appreciate and stop abusing her.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you about, I know this may seem kind of off topic although it's still about water, but how do you feel about bottled water?
It's nonsense. I feel that, that we're a country that finally got to where we had potable tap water, which about 1 billion of our fellow humans still don't have. And some of it, like in New York and here in the Bay Area, is particularly excellent because, they flooded Hetch Hetchy, this beautiful, Twin Valley to Yosemite, and it's great granite reservoir. And the idea of filling plastic bottles with water that doesn't have any particular provenance and shipping water from like Italy and Fiji. So you're burning fossil fuels to ship water around the world, and then you take a slug and throw the plastic away, and that lasts for another 20,000 years. It's insane. It's kind of like the ultimately success of the advertising industry to convince people that you should spend more to drink a glass of water than you do to
And people can use I mean, we have great water here in the Bay Area, but people can, and other places in the country, but you can also just get one of those filters for your tap too. Like, there's no reason to buy bottled water. You mentioned in your book about all of the, bottles and stuff that come up on shore that get, there's a lot of rubbish that gets put in the ocean, right?
And we just had the annual cleanup this past Saturday, and almost all the waste we find is plastic. A lot of it's plastic bottles. I did a cleanup in northwest Hawaii where it gets the impact of the Pacific Gyre, and it's literally plasticine. There's this one beach where it's not just the large marine debris, but you pull up the sand mixed in with the white silicate or chips of red and blue plastic that's become ubiquitous. And
that's crazy.
We don't need a throwaway culture, and cardboard and paper are not that scary that we can't return to sort of traditional packaging models. The problem with plastic, it's a byproduct of oil and gas. It's so cheap for industry.
Yeah.
They'd rather serve us plastic than glass or plastic than aluminum. But plastics become, EPA should list it as a toxic because once it breaks down in the ocean, those polymers are literally a million times more effective than salt water.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so sorry we ran out of time. David's website is bluefront.org. Your work's incredible. Your book's incredible. Pay attention.
Thank you, Michelle. The only thing I tell people is go to the beach because you'll protect what you love.
Absolutely, and I do love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
This is KCAA Loma Linda, the station that leaves no listener behind. CNBC News is next, a courtesy of buysellmakeoffer.com, where you can post a video about items you have for sale. Sign up now. It's free.
Investor worries about the Fed hiking interest rates before this year is through. The Dow today down 179 points, the Nasdaq down 72, and oil closing back below $46 a barrel. Democratic presidential contender Hillary Clinton going hard after sky-high drug prices. She wants to cap monthly and annual out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs for people with chronic or serious health conditions, allow Medicare to negotiate prices with drug makers, and require drug companies to put a set portion of profits toward research instead of toward TV and news